I am your Dr. Salauddin and this is our fracture classification series, the intertrochanteric fracture classification. If you are not going to watch this video till the last, then you are going to miss the bread and butter of the crux of orthopedics. Keep holding on to me till the end of this video and we will be learning all the types of fracture classifications and for each type what we are going to do. Today we are going to learn the intertrochanteric fracture classification in a timeline based pattern. Evans is the person who has given the first classification for intertrochanteric fractures, that is in 1949. In the same year, then Boyd and Griffith gave the classification. Then other many classifications came one by one, that is in 1974 Tronzo's classification, then in 1979 Kyle classification, 1980 Jensen's modification of Evans classification, then in 1990s came our AO classification, then in 2018 the AO classification got modified. But still there are some recent classifications that have given much clinical importance in our day-to-day practice. That is, in 2006 Kulkarni et al. Modified the Jensen-Evans classification, which is now again used in many clinical practices. And the most important, the recent most, the CT based classification, that is in 2022 Kalia et al. Study in intertrochanteric fractures using CT imaging study. It is a more clinically relevant classification nowadays. And the final classification, that is Babulkar practical subclassification. It's of minor clinical importance. Now let's dive into our first classification, that is the Evans classification. So what is this Evans classification is based on? It is based on the integrity of the medial cortical buttress. What is this medial cortical buttress? We will see in the X-ray image. Medial cortical buttress is nothing but the medial most part of the intertrochanteric area where the strongest part of the cortex is present, called as the calcar. Okay, if this calcar is intact, it will determine the fracture stability and the risk of collapse, that is the fracture going into coxa vara. So here in the Evans there is only two types, that is stable fracture or an unstable fracture. There are two types, that is type 1 and type 2. In type 1 there are again 4 groups, and type 2 there is only one type of classification. Okay, in first 4 groups of the type 1, the first group 1 and group 2 are the only stable fractures. There are only 2 stable patterns of fracture in Evans classification. Remaining 3, group 3 and group 4 in type 1 and the type 2, these 3 are unstable fractures. In the type 1, if it is undisplaced fracture, it is a stable fracture. In displaced, even if it is displaced, but it can be reduced. Okay, in Evans it's an, clinically speaking, Evans is an intraoperative classification, that is on table you are going to reduce the fracture. If the fracture is being able to reduce even if it is displaced, then it's an stable fracture. If it is displaced but not reducible, or if it is a communicate fracture, or if it is a reverse oblique fracture, these 3 types are unstable fractures, and this will account only for the 28% of the classifications. Okay, 28% of the fractures. The 72% of the fractures mostly that occur are stable fractures. In that too, undisplaced fractures account for the 65% of the intertrochanteric fractures. So what are the features of these intertrochanteric fractures in Evans classification? So undisplaced fracture, here the cortical buttress is intact, there is no displacement and it is in perfect position, it unites in perfect position. Then the displaced fractures that can be reduced, these are the medial cortices overlap and they are reducible, and reduction will restore the stability, hence they are stable fractures. Then type 3, the displaced fractures which are not reducible, the cortical overlap which is not reduced, and then there is a medial instability that will persist, and there is an expected coxa vara. So if it is an inherently unstable fracture, so this will not be reduced and it will lead to coxa vara. And group 4, where there is a comminution of the fracture, the medial cortical buttress, it is destroyed by the comminution, so there is a high risk of collapse and there is coxa vara. And then finally type 2 is an reverse oblique fracture, which the fracture line runs upward and inwards in a reverse oblique fraction and there is a strong medial displacement tendency. So this is the fracture pattern itself is an inherently unstable fracture. Okay, so this is Evans classification. Let's go to Boyd and Griffith classification. Here it is based on the fracture pattern. So first, type 1 is an 2-part stable fracture. It's only a 2-part stable fracture. Then type 2 is an unstable fracture with comminution, posteromedial comminution. Type 3 is the most important, that is reverse oblique fracture. Here there is an ambiguity because the original Boyd and Griffith classification which was published, there he gives type 3 is reverse oblique, but in recent some textbooks they have changed it as type 4 is reverse oblique and type 3 is subtrochanteric extension. But the original article which was published by Boyd and Griffith, there he gives the subtrochanteric extension with the reverse oblique fracture is type 3, and type 4 it is an subtrochanteric and intertrochanteric fracture with the fracture in more than 2 planes. If the fracture is in more than 2 planes, then only it is type 4. It is given in the original article. We will see the image, we will understand better. So this is the stable 2-part fracture, the intertrochanteric line fracture, that is stable. Then it is an unstable with posteromedial comminution. There are more than 2 fragments. Here is the one fragment, here is one fragment, here. Okay, the posteromedial comminution is present. It is type 2, Boyd and Griffith type 2 posteromedial comminution is present. Okay, then type 3 is, it is a reverse oblique fracture with a minimal subtrochanteric extension. Then type 4 is, it is subtrochanteric and intertrochanteric fracture with fracture in more than 2 planes. Here is the one plane and here is the one plane. These are the 2 plane fractures that will come under type 4. Okay. So what is the description of these classifications? The stable fracture, it is a simple intertrochanteric fracture without any comminution. Then type 2 is a comminution fracture with multiple secondary fracture lines. Type 3 is fracture line extending distally at or just below the lesser trochanter with lateral shaft extension. The fracture line is extending into the lateral shaft extension, that is reverse oblique fracture. The type 4 is a complex fracture involving both intertrochanteric region and the proximal shaft in more than one plane. So it is more than one plane, that is 2 plane fracture, it is type 4. Here the stability of the type 1 fracture, as it is stable, it will be reduced easily and it is a stable fracture fixation. Type 2 is an unstable fracture, but it is difficult to reduce and reduction may not be holding even after the reduction. Okay. Then type 3 is reverse oblique, which is inherently unstable and there is always a medial drift risk. Okay. Then type 4 is a very difficult reduction and it needs strong fixation, often in 2 plane fixation. Okay. There has to be a 2 plane fixation for the type 4 subtrochanteric and intertrochanteric 2 plane fracture. Okay, this is Boyd and Griffith classification. Now you tell me what is this fracture type according to Boyd and Griffith. See the X-ray. It is only one fracture line is there and there is only 2 parts. This is a stable 2-part fracture type. Yes, exactly, it is type 1 Boyd and Griffith. Next is, what is this? There is multiple fracture fragments and there is displacement and unstable. It is posteromedial comminution. There is posteromedial comminution That's why it's an unstable fracture. So it is type 2 of Boyd and Griffiths. Type 2 unstable posteromedial comminuted fracture. What is this? Here you can see there is the fracture line is running towards the lateral cortex, starting from the just below the neck. So this is an reverse oblique fracture, that is with subtrochanteric extension. It is type 3 fracture. Okay, it is type 3 of Boyd and Griffith. Now you can see here, as I have told you, the type 4 of Boyd and Griffith has fracture in 2 planes. Here you can clearly see the fracture is going here in one plane and here in another plane. Okay, so there is 2 plane fracture, subtrochanteric extension with intertrochanteric fracture. It is type 4 of Boyd and Griffith, type 4. Okay, now this is Tronzo's classification. Tronzo classification, it is a descriptive classification where he gives based on the pattern of the fracture. So type 1 is incomplete fracture, the fracture is not complete, type 1. Type 2 is a both the trochanters are fractured and it may or may not be displaced. Okay, with it, this is a fracture without any comminution from greater trochanter to the lesser trochanter. It may or may not be displaced. Then in other terms you can say type 2 is a complete fracture. Then type 3 is a comminuted fracture. Type 3 comminuted fracture with a large lesser trochanter fragment and posterior wall has blown out. The type 3 here the posterior wall has been blown out and the neck beak may be impacted into the shaft. This is the neck beak. So this neck beak may be impacted into the shaft and there is a large lesser trochanter fragment and the posterior wall may be blown out. This is type 3. In again type 3 there is an type 3 variant, same as type 3, but there is a greater trochanter fracture that has been fractured and separated. So this is greater trochanter fracture that has been fractured and separated. Similarly, there is a beak that has been impacted in the shaft and a large lesser fragment. This is type 3 variant. Then type 4 is the posterior wall has been exploded and the neck spike is displaced outside the shaft. You have to note this, the neck spike is displacing outside the shaft. When it is going inside the shaft, it is type 3. If the neck spike is going outside the shaft, it is type 4. Then type 5 is the reverse oblique fracture, that may be with or without greater trochanter or lesser trochanter separation. It's a reverse oblique fracture. This is Tronzo's classification, simply based on the fracture pattern. Then the Kyle's classification. There are 4 types in Kyle's classification. Number 1 is an undisplaced stable fracture without any comminution. Simple undisplaced stable fracture. Then type 2 is a stable but minimal comminution is present and it is displaced fracture. So in Kyle's classification, type 2 is a stable fracture with displaced intertrochanteric fracture with minimal comminution. Then type 3, it is an unstable with comminution. If there is a comminution of the fracture, then it is type 3 of Kyle's classification. Then type 4 is with subtrochanteric extension and it is the most difficult fracture, difficult to fix due to the strong muscular forces. So intertrochanteric fracture with subtrochanteric extension and there is more comminution, it is type 4 fracture. Simply the Kyle's is the most simple classification. Stable and displaced type 1, stable displaced type 2, type 3 unstable and comminuted, it is type 3, type 4 subtrochanteric extension, simply it is type 4. Kyle's is the simple classification. Okay. Then coming to Jensen's modification of Evans classification. What did he modify in Evans? So in Evans he just made 3 types from Evans classification. Jensen made 3 types, that is the stable two fragment fracture which may be displaced or undisplaced. Even it is displaced or displaced, undisplaced, it is stable 2 fragment fracture, type 1. Type 2 is, it is an unstable fracture with 3 fracture fragments. It may be involving the greater trochanter or the lesser trochanter. Then type 3, it is 4 fragment fractures that may include rare reverse oblique variant with a large GT fragment. It is the Jensen's modification of Evans classification. In AMO classification, coming to the AOs, what is the trochanteric region? Can anyone describe from where to where the trochanteric region is in the AO? That is from the intertrochanteric ridge it will start, and from lesser trochanter 1 centimeter below the lesser trochanter in a transverse fashion. This whole area will include the trochanteric region. So what is the number given? As we all know from all the previous classifications, AO classification is an alphanumerical classification. The number for femur is 3 and for the trochanteric region is 1. Sorry, for the proximal femur it is 1. For the trochanter it is A. This is A and neck is B and head is C. Okay. So trochanter is A. Coming to 3A types, first 3A1, it is a simple fracture. Simple trochanteric fracture is 3A1. 3A 1.1 is, it is greater trochanter or the lesser trochanter fracture, where you add N for greater trochanter and O for lesser trochanter. Okay, if it is greater trochanter fracture, N, A 1.1 N. If it is lesser trochanter, you say A 1.1 O. Okay, then 2-part fracture. 3-1 A 1.2. Simple 2-part fracture, it is A 1.2. Then the lateral wall is intact, that is more than 20 to 20.5 mm of fractured lateral wall is present. Then you say it as A 1.3. What is this greater than 20.5 mm lateral wall intactness? This is the latest addition in the intertrochanteric AO classification, where you have to see the lateral wall thickness. Lateral wall thickness. Why you need lateral wall thickness? It is why it is important, and he has given specifically more than 20.5 mm of lateral wall should be intact. That is from the midpoint of the fracture towards the lateral cortex. If you mark these 2 points and measure these 2 points, this distance is called as lateral wall thickness, and this lateral wall should be more than 20.5 mm for doing a dynamic hip screw plating. Okay, to put a dynamic hip screw plate, this much of lateral wall should be intact. If this lateral wall thickness is less than that, and if it is not intact, then you cannot do a dynamic hip screw plating. Then you have to the only option left out is doing an proximal femoral nailing, PFN. Okay. That is why lateral wall thickness is important. Now coming to 3A1-2. Here the lateral wall is incompetent. Here is given less than 20.5 mm. Here there is comminution, that is multifragmentary comminution. A2.2 is there is an one intermediate fragment. Okay, this is the one intermediate fragment. Only one intermediate fragment is present, that is A2.2. If there are more than 2 intermediate fragments, then it is A 2.3. This is the 3A1 2 classification. Coming to 3A1 3 classification, here it is the reverse oblique. 3A1 3, all the reverse oblique fractures are included. In reverse oblique also, if it is a simple oblique fracture, it is A 3.1. If it is transverse reverse oblique, the shaft, near the shaft, if it is fractured transversely, then it is A 3.2. And if there is a fragmentation or wedging, then it is A 3.3. Okay, this is the AO classification for intertrochanteric fractures. Now give me numbering for this X-rays according to the AO classification. Now anyone tell me what is this classification based on AO? First we will go number wise. For femur it is 3, for proximal femur it is 1, and for trochanteric region it is A. Till here it's clear. What is this fracture? It is a simple intertrochanteric fracture. So it is A 1.1. There is no combination. Okay, this is 3 A 3.1 A point 1.1. Okay, there is lot of combination. What numbering are you going to give? Is this a reverse oblique? No, so it cannot be A3. Is it a simple fracture? No, it is a comminuted fracture. So what type of combination, you know, what number comes for the combination? 3.1 A 2 is for combination. In 2, is it 2.1 or 2.2? Here there are multiple fragments and there is, let's go back and see. See, if it is A 3.1.2, A 3.1 A2 with only one fragment, it is intermediate A 2.2. There are multiple fragments, it is A 2.3. There is no 2.1, that you have to remember. There is no 2.1 is not there, only 2.2 and 2.3 is there. So this is A 2.3. There is lot of intermediate fragments. Now what type is this? Simply it is reverse oblique, right? It is reverse oblique. So 3.1A3. Again in 3.1A3, is it 3.1 or 3.2 or 3.3? 3.1 is, there is a oblique fracture. Okay. If it is transverse fracture, it is 3.2. So this is 3.1. Reverse oblique in an oblique fashion. Now what is this? This is, it has an reverse oblique pattern and it has an extension into the intertrochanteric region. According to Boyd and Griffith, it is type 4. But according to AO, here there are multiple fragments in reverse obliquity. So it is 3.1A 3.3. Okay, this is 3.1A 3.3. So coming to Kulkarni et al., where he modified Jensen and Evans classification, he gave 3 types, each having ABC. Okay. So type 1, there is again having type 1, A, B and C. So type 1 is stable undisplaced fracture, type 2 is stable minimally displaced, and type 3 is minimally displaced with a small LT fragment. Okay, all 3 are stable. Now coming to type 2, type 2 A, B and C. Type 2 is unstable 3-part with large posteromedial fragment, that is the posteromedial fragment is lesser trochanter is large. It is type 2A. Type 2B is unstable 4-part fracture, and type 2C is shattered lateral wall. In these two, there are the 3-part and 4-part are unstable, but if the lateral wall is shattered, it is an highly unstable fracture. The most highly unstable fracture is when the lateral wall is fractured, shattered. Then type 3 A is intertrochanteric extending into the subtrochanteric region, and type 3B is reverse oblique pattern, and type 3C is intertrochanteric with an cervical extension, that is the fracture extending into the neck region. This is also very highly unstable fracture. Okay. Remaining two are the reverse oblique and the IT fracture extending into the subtrochanteric. These are very unstable fractures. Okay. You can see the images of the Kulkarni et al. Classification. So the two-part undisplaced fracture is type A. There is the fracture is here. This is the first part and this is the second part. This is the two-part undisplaced. It is the two-part displaced, then it is type 1B. And stable fracture with a lesser trochanter piece. The lesser trochanter small piece is present, then it is 1C. These are stable. Then the unstable fractures where there are three pieces. This is the one piece, this is the two piece, and this is a large lesser trochanter piece. Large lesser trochanter piece is 2A. Then type 4 is where there is a greater trochanter fracture, head, lesser trochanter fracture, and shaft. So there are four fragments. The four pieces are fractured, then it is type 2B. If the lateral wall is completely shattered, the lateral wall is shattered, then it is type 2C. Then the very unstable fractures are when there is an extension into the subtrochanteric region. Intertrochanter fracture extending into the subtrochanteric region is 3A. If it is a reverse oblique fracture, reverse oblique, it is 3B. And if it is extending into the neck is getting fractured, then it is type 3C. This is Kyle's classification. Now coming to our most important clinical classification, coming to Kalia et al. Classification, which is based on the CT based imaging. He divides the intertrochanteric region into three columns. Okay, first is the medial column, second is the lateral column, and the central column. So in the medial column, it consists the lesser trochanter and the posteromedial cortex. In the lateral column, it includes the greater trochanter and the lateral wall. And in the central column, it includes the head neck junction and the primary intertrochanteric lines. So what these columns interpret is, the medial column is the primary stability, and it is for the integrity of the intertrochanteric region. The lateral column, it determines the collapse and the implant selection. So if the lateral column is intact, we can do an DHS. If the lateral column is not intact, or as we have seen in the AO classification, the lateral column thickness, if it is less than 20.5 mm, then we have to go for an only intramedullary nailing. So it determines the collapse and the implant selection, the lateral wall thickness, the lateral column. And the central column, it will determine the fracture direction and the load transfer. If the central column is fractured, where should the load go? It will determine the load transfer and the fracture direction. So according to these columns, there are three types of disruption patterns. One is the single column fracture, two column fracture, and the three column fracture. Single column fracture, whether only the medial or the lateral column is disrupted, then only the DHS is possible. Okay, if any one of the isolated medial or isolated lateral column is disrupted, only DHS is possible. Then two column fracture, where medial column is fractured along with central or lateral column, or medial with central column disruption, either of the columns, medial or lateral, or medial or central, these two. In that, the most important thing that you have to remember is the medial column should be fractured. The medial and the lateral, or the medial or the central, that is the two column fracture. There is only the intramedullary nail is preferred. It doesn't say that DHS is not possible. Intramedullary nail is preferred, but you can still do an DHS when the fracture is stable. Okay. Then the three column fracture, well, all the three columns, complete compromise of all the three columns has happened. Then the only possibility is intramedullary nailing, which is mandatory. That too, the fracture is going for an high failure risk. Okay, even if you fix with a nailing or a DHS, the fracture is more prone for high failure rate. Okay, this is the clinical relevance and importance of Kalia et al. Classification. So as you can see in the image, this is the red area is the medial column. This is the anteromedial column, and here in the green area is the posteromedial column. Combined these two is the medial column. Okay. Then the yellow region is the lateral column. This is whole part is the lateral column. The blue parts have been mentioned as a greater trochanter and lesser trochanter, and the central region is the head, neck, and this is the head, neck, and the intertrochantric line. This is the central column. Okay. So medial, central, and the lateral columns. These three columns determine the medial column will determine the integrity or stability of the fracture. Lateral column will determine the collapse and the implant selection. Central column will determine the fracture direction and the load transfer of the fracture. Okay. And finally, Babulkar practical subclassification is a simple classification. Stable intertrochanteric fracture with intact posteromedial cortex is type A. Unstable fracture with posteromedial combination is type B. Reverse oblique and two plane fractures he included in type C, and fractures with lateral wall deficiency. Here the lateral wall deficiency he has included in type 4, which is more for collapses. This is the Babulkar's practical classification. Okay. Now we'll do a small exercise. I'll be giving the numbering for each of this X-ray, and you please comment in the comment section what type of implant can be used in this type of fractures based on the lateral wall thickness, and also you can apply Kalia et al.'s column theories. Okay, here I have not given the CTs, but as in the X-rays you can see, and you can determine whether the columns are intact or not, or which column has been fractured, and you can tell what type of implant can be used. For the first one I will be telling. So let's number this as A. Okay, so this is the A X-ray, where here is the fracture line. Okay, simple fracture. The lateral wall thickness is more than 20.5 mm. Okay, so I will be preferring a DHS here. I will be doing a diamonding hip screw. So for this, what you are going to do? For the B X-ray, what you are going to do? Comment in the comment section. Okay. Then this is for the C. For the C X-ray, what you are going to do? Whether you are going to plate it by using a DHS, or you are going to do a IMIL nail. Then for D X-ray, this is the D X-ray, and here is the fracture line. Okay. For the D X-ray, what you are going to do? Then for the E, the large lesser trochanter fragment, and here is the fracture line. For this, what you are going to do? For F, here is the fracture line, and for G, here is the fracture line, lesser trochanter, and here is the fracture line. And this is the H fracture. And that's all for today. Please comment in the comment section what are the implants you are going to use from A to H X-rays. Then I will be replying to each of your comments. Please subscribe, like, and share this video, and subscribe to ASAN Network for you updated in your clinical rounds, and stay confident in your clinical practice. If you like this video and you want to watch other classifications of the femur, then I have given the link in the description. You can go and check in my channel the other fracture classifications.